Adding strokes to our artwork is another fun and easy process, but there are some very cool new options in Illustrator CS5 that make things much easier. Let's take a look at using the distribute function to place lines in our artwork, then view some of the stroke options available, including the new dash line corners and arrowhead features of CS5. Alright, let's start by adding some dividing lines between these type columns that we created earlier on the A3 poster. With the shape of these lines matching the visual of the mountain silhouette, I think the lines can enhance that by being different lengths also to match these different shapes. So let's go ahead and try that. Let's open up our layers panel here and make sure that we unlock our type layer, which is where those shapes are stored. And whilst we're here, we'll also turn off our guides just to make it a bit easier to see. Now I'm going to zoom in all the way down here, and whilst we're down there, let's maybe go Command Y or Control Y on the PC to go into outline mode, because we'll draw the lines first and then we'll play around with the stroke options. So make sure the type layer is selected. Let's come over to our tools and go ahead and select the line tool, okay? Now this is fairly straightforward to use. Anywhere you wish to click and drag, any direction you can draw a straight line, okay? I'm just going to undo that. What we want to do is create one that matches the exact height of this middle section here. So what I'm going to do, position the cursor on the upper right hand side of our frame, click and drag all the way down to our intersection right there, okay? And we've generated a line of exactly the right length. Now this is why we're in outline mode, because we can't actually see a stroke applied to this. Now again, I'm going to go back to the main selection tool so we don't accidentally draw new lines, and we can go ahead and select this one and maybe just nudge it a millimeter or so to the right hand side. Now when it comes to alignment and basically wanting to center these lines perfectly centered between each of these elements, there are a couple of ways that we can do it. Alright, I'm going to put that back where it was. Remember that when we generated these, we drew a shape and we split it into a grid, and we made sure that we had, I think, 5 millimeters between each one. Well, knowing that half of 5 millimeters is 2.5, we could bring up our move dialog box at this point and say, horizontally, let's move 2.5 millimeters across. And as you can see, that gives us an exact center. So that's one option. You know that one now. I want to show you a different one that we haven't seen yet. Let's go ahead and cancel that. Again, I'm just going to nudge it so we can see it slightly different to the others, but it's still aligned to the top. What we can do instead is let's go ahead and select all three of these shapes, both text frames on either side of the line and the line itself, and then come on up to the Align options here in the Control panel, or indeed over here in the Align palette. We can come down here and make sure that we have Align to Selection highlighted. Now, everything up to this point has been aligned to Artboard, and we use Key Object as and when we double select our key object. But this time, we're going to use Align to Selection. When we have that done, we can come over here and say horizontally distribute the centers. Go ahead and click that. It perfectly centers it in that location for you. So very, very easy to do. You have two options there. Choose whichever one suits you at the time. Now we can switch back to preview mode, okay, so Command Y or Control Y again on the PC, and we'll just click outside to deselect everything. So our line in the middle currently has no stroke applied, so go ahead and select that, and whilst we're there, let's zoom in and view nice and closely here at the top so we can see the options that are being applied. So currently no stroke. Let's come over here into the color panel and make sure that we do have the stroke selected. Although there's nothing applied, we still need that highlighted in order to apply color in the right place. And then we'll come down to the stroke panel. Now, like we did with gradient, this has more options than we can actually see. So let's come down to gradient, make sure that we first say hide options, and then let's go to stroke and show our options. Now, if you have a large enough screen, you can have all of these open at any time, but again, we're just being compact here. So what I'm going to do is apply a default stroke at this point, go over to the weight, and let's say apply a 4-point stroke. Now by default, it's going to use the last swatch, which in this case was white. That's exactly what I need. If for some reason you have a different color, just go ahead and choose white. Let's make sure first though that we are in CMYK mode. Okay, once again, we're switching back and forth between RGB and CMYK documents. That can happen. Now, we can see that the stroke itself is actually aligned to the center of our line. So 4 points, 2 of them are being applied on the left and 2 of them on the right. That's the default that Illustrator has, and that's how it works. InDesign, oddly enough, allows you to choose which side of the line that the stroke goes on, but Illustrator, very slightly different. Now in the stroke panel, you can see that we have different cap options, okay? Currently, the cap of the line ends where the line ends. We can also choose rounded, which goes over the edge and nicely rounds off. And this is really nice if you're doing sort of wavy lines with thick strokes. And you also have a squared option, which basically takes the same distance. So 2 points is on the left-hand side of the line. It goes up an additional 2 and across and down. So sort of, it's like a rounding, but with a squared end. But for now, we're going to keep the cap precisely as it is. Now, whilst we're here, let's switch it back down to what we are going to use, which is going to be just simply half a point. Okay, I just wanted to use a thick stroke there so you could see what was going on. Now we're going to zoom down. Let's maybe fit in window and then just re-zoom so we can see what's going on over here. Basically what we want are 2 more lines. We want another one in the middle here and another one in the dead center of all 6 columns, because if we do these 2, what we can do is reflect them across the other side and save ourselves a little bit of work. So I'm going to hold down the Option key or the Alt key on the PC and drag a copy of this so it comes over and aligns dead on the top right of the next column. Okay. Now, as you'll know, or you've probably noticed, the height is going to be different and we need it to fit the height of this particular frame. So the line will sit in the middle and come all the way down to here. 2 options that you have. We could use free transform, okay? Hit E to get free transform. You know that you could scale down. But before you do, what's the one thing you need to check? Go over into transform. Do make sure that on the flyout option here, scale stroke and effects is not turned on. If it is, and we use free transform there, we're going to scale the stroke from half a point to 0.65 or something like that. Not that it's much difference, but consistency when you're doing artwork like this is key. So do make sure, if you ever pull up free transform and you're doing a line like this that has a stroke on it, make sure that that's not selected, okay? So now that we know it's not, we could quite easily just grab our central anchor point there and drag down and it snaps into place. You can double check over here in the stroke panel, it's still set to 0.5. Now the other way to do it, if I just undo that, is instead to go to the direct selection tool. Remember, if you edit the path itself, you're not scaling anything, so the stroke width will not adjust. So with that in mind, we could deselect, come over here and just click on the bottom anchor point and simply drag that down to a line in exactly the same way. We get the same result. The stroke width doesn't change and we end up with a longer line. Okay, so whichever one of those you wish to use, that's totally up to you. So go back to the main selection tool, click on the line, and as we did a second ago, let's hold down the Shift key and click both of the text frames either side of that. Now remember, these aren't text frames at this point in time, but they will be eventually. With those 3 items selected, we're still on selection over here in the Align options. Let's go ahead and distribute those as well. Now we do need a third line over here in the center. We need exactly the same option to be able to shrink it down as well. So let's do the same thing. Hold down your Option key or the Alt on the PC, drag another copy over so it aligns on the top there. We can do free transform because we know that we've got scale, stroke, and effects turned off. And this time let's drag our center point and drop it right up here so it hits our intersection there. Go back to your main selection tool, Shift select both text frames either side, and once again distribute their space. Now in order to get the other 2 lines to appear over here on the other side, okay, we don't have to do the same process, stretch and everything else. Let's use a reflection. We don't need to duplicate the middle one. All we want to do is take these 2 lines, do a reflection and a copy at the same time, leaving these where they are. Okay, so select both of those lines using the Shift key. Then we'll come over to the rotate tool, but click and hold, go ahead and choose reflect. Remember all our keyboard shortcuts here that we learned earlier on. We wish to specify that this is our reflection point. So hold down your Option key, Alt key on the PC, and click to bring up your dialog box. What we want is a vertical reflection, and we also wish to hit copy. All right. As soon as we do that, click and deselect with our selection tool, you can see that we now have lines all the way across, perfectly sized, and they have a 0.5 white stroke applied. So that is now done.